You started something called Schoolhouse.world, which is a website dedicated to live tutoring for groups of students. How exactly does that work?
This has been a dream of mine for a very long time. Obviously, Khan Academy can help students learn at their own time and pace, get as much practice and feedback as they need, tools for teachers to be able to keep track of what students are working on. But the ideal is to have that and have in-person, whatever you want to call it, synchronous sessions, ideally in a classroom. But if you can't get in a classroom, ideally on video conference. And then when COVID hit and last spring, and we saw a huge variation in how well schools were able to support kids on that synchronous level. Some teachers, some schools were doing incredible jobs keeping kids engaged, while some schools weren't able to do anything at all. That's when I started talking to volunteers saying, hey, we need to build something where we can match kids who need help with amazing tutors and teachers from around the world who are willing to give that help. And that's what schoolhouse.world is. It's actually separate from Khan Academy. I hope that these two projects converge in the not too far future. It's a separate project. It's volunteer driven. It's also a not-for-profit project. But right now we actually have capacity for a few thousand more students. We actually have a ton of amazing volunteer tutors. So for anyone listening or anyone that you know might benefit from it, let those kids know. You can go to schoolhouse.world. We're doing high school math right now, but I encourage everyone to register. We're going to expand that to K through 12 and other subjects in the next few months.
Now, a lot of things have to go right for this to really work. You've also said that this could lead to an education catastrophe. Are you seeing signs of that so far?
We're still early in the school year, but the catastrophe scenario is not that far off. Even we have 20–30% of the population that really doesn't have sufficient internet access. School districts have been doing a heroic job getting laptops out. The local telecom carriers have been doing a great job getting them that internet access. But even then, we're seeing 5–10% of the population isn't engaged for whatever reason. They might be young kids. Maybe their parents are essential workers. They don't have enough devices at home, not sufficient bandwidth. We don't know. And so that 5 or 10%, you can imagine they were always the kids, these were already the kids who were probably disproportionately not engaging in school. And now, if they're not even being reached for 6 months, 1 year, not only will they not learn over that time period, they're going to atrophy and they might just lose the structures of school. And the worst thing is it's going to be really bad for their mental health. Distance learning right now, ironically, is most kids' lifeline to community and socialization and friendships. And so if these kids are completely disconnected, I really worry about what's going to happen.
If you could quantify it, are you concerned this will be a lost year, quote unquote, for many children? And if so, how many children?
I wish I could say something more positive. I think the reality is in the coming year, middle-class children, upper middle-class children are probably going to do fine. They're going to be engaged. There might even be some silver linings where their parents are getting more engaged than ever, finding them extra supports. While I would say 20 or 30% of the population is going to be a really difficult scenario. That 20–30%, the schools might not have the resources to support them appropriately. They might not have the resources or supports at home appropriately. And that's already the group that might have already been struggling. And so if you have a year of this, and everyone I talk to, this whole crisis, people have been treating it as just a series of rolling 1 or 2 month crises. But the reality is we're now 6 months into it. And any reasonable scenarios around vaccines or therapies speak to this crisis going through much of the school year. And there's even some chance it goes into the next school year.
My mom is a teacher who's teaching remotely this fall. And she asked me to ask you, what is the best way for teachers to bond with their students if they are remote? How do they foster that human connection?
So in a normal scenario, teachers feel a lot of pressure that they have 180 school days. They have to cover, making the numbers up, say 60 standards. And so they have to go through those standards. And so you get down to business very, very quickly. You get into the academic standards. This is a scenario where the teachers have to do essentially double duty. And they've always had to do double duty to some degree. Not only do they have to cover the academic standards, they have to make sure that the kids are feeling supported emotionally, that they have outlets where they can have fun and connect with their friends. And so my recommendation, we've seen a lot of teachers do this really well, is when you get on that video conference together, it's completely okay for the first 5 minutes to be fun, for talk about life, connect with the students. Every 20 minutes or so, have another moment where it can be fun conversation. Yes, you might not cover all of the standards. That's okay. If you get reasonable coverage of the standards, kids don't atrophy their skills. And actually, I think this is good for the teachers as well, because the teachers need that connection. But you're able to talk about life. You're able to talk about how folks are doing. That makes a big difference.
What about screen time? We've been in this now almost 6 months, and I definitely noticed my son, trying to get him out of the house was harder. And then I felt like when we were outside, he wanted to come back inside. How concerned are you about prolonged exposure to screens, or do we just accept that this is how it has to be for this year, at least, and not worry about it?
Yeah, the answer is someplace in between. Obviously, screen time is people's lifeline to learning and everything right now. But I think if schools try to replicate a 6 or 7 or 8 hour school day on video conference, I think that's a mistake. That's way too much screen time, not only for kids, that's way too much screen time for us. I think any of us who've sat in a 2 hour meeting on video conference, you need to take a walk. I actually turn the video off and I go for a walk in a lot of my own meetings. And so what I say for kids, if they're able to get 2-3 hours, that's more than enough. Even that's a lot. And even that should be broken up, I would say, into about 20-minute sessions and just as much outdoor time as possible.